Right, welcome everybody. I'm going to give folks a few minutes to join, and then I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers for today, and we'll go ahead and get started. While I'm waiting for some more folks to come in, let me make sure that our chat is on so that everyone can send us messages over there. Great. All right, cool. Looks like we've got some folks jumping in, so I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining today for the next edition of our Design for Success series on architecture and development and building in public. Today we're joined by Gayle and Evelyn Lee. Gayle is the Director of Architecture at Level Architecture and Interiors. He has 15 years of diverse experience as an architect. He's a creative problem solver driven by empathy and optimism. Utilizing design thinking, he bridges traditional practice with emerging technologies to create meaningful physical and digital spaces. Believes that architects should take ownership throughout development, providing innovative solutions that enhance beauty, functionality, and environmental value. As an architect and a realtor, he aims to deliver exceptional, sustainable design and real estate services tailored to clients' unique needs. And we also have Evelyn Lee here with us today. Evelyn is the founder of the Practice of Architecture, and she's been on the client side for over a decade and has spent the last 5 years in tech, helping to create exceptional employee experiences while growing the business. She's a startup advisor and fractional COO to small and medium-sized business firms, the founder of the Practice of Architecture, and the host of the podcast Practice Disrupted. All right. So today we're going to be talking about building in public. Gayle is going to be sharing about starting an innovative architecture firm that expands beyond traditional practice into the development realm. It's going to be a conversational webinar today, so please feel free to use the chat to tell us your thoughts, your comments, any questions throughout today's presentation. I know that Evelyn just posted asking everyone where they're calling in from, so we would love to hear from you throughout today's webinar, and we're going to be launching some polls as well throughout the presentation. All right, with that, I would love to hand it over to you, Adam and Evelyn, to feel free to get started with today's conversation.
Thanks, Bo. Thanks for having us. So this is going to be a really interactive session as we try to make all of our Design for Success sessions interactive. So feel free to chime in. While we have somebody call in from New Zealand, Rosalind, thank you, and Birmingham, Alabama. I am in Lexington, Kentucky right now at an architecture firm's office. So I am not in California these days. Adam is in Gainesville, Florida. Yep. So feel free to drop in the chat, ask us questions as we go along. It's going to be a really open conversation, and we're calling this building in public. And I was wondering, Bo is in Philadelphia. I was wondering how many of you are familiar with building in public. So Bo, why don't you just go ahead and launch that first poll whenever you're ready. Right. Toronto, Canada, Western Canada. Hi, Cody. Hi, Nima. Thank you for joining us today. A few more numbers, a few people trailing in. So we just asked you, how familiar you are with building in public. We have a critical mass, Bo. Do you want to just go ahead and show us where we are? Not at all. Moderately familiar. Pretty familiar. So for the two people that are very familiar, feel free to chime in. Currently involved in 2 projects, so very excited about this webinar. Nice. So when we call building in public, we're not necessarily talking about architecture building in public, but for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with building in public, this is something we actually kind of like to do in my little community, the Practice Community Plus Lab, where we give people a free space. So Adam's being very brave coming on here to talk about kind of where they are, ask questions to the group, and figure out together collectively how to move forward. So more specifically, building in public originated as a strategy among tech startups and independent creators who sought to foster greater transparency and community engagement by essentially openly sharing how they are developing processes, their challenges, and various different milestones. So this will be like a very scrunched down version, not happening over time. But this approach is often facilitated either on social media or blogs. I would say if anybody follows the 30 by 40 architect out there, Eric Reinholdt, he does a lot of this on his YouTube channel where he brings clients in and he talks about how his buildings and his projects are progressing. So that's a version of building in public there. But really it's just to create a space where we can all learn from one another. So even though Adam and I are the talking heads here, we welcome for you to join us on the stage, to ask questions, and in the chat, whatever you feel most comfortable about doing. I don't know, Adam, if you had anything more to add to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there, and it's really just publicly sharing your successes and your failures. And I think, you talk about social media and the ability to share things, faster, and having these sort of content updates where we're not having to wait until the end of a project to say, well, here's how it went, or here's the shiny image. It's, you're really seeing how things come together and go together. And that can be really messy sometimes. So I know you kind of jokingly said Adam's very brave to be here, but that's part of this. I mean, that's very much in line with the topic of today. And it's putting yourself out there, to get constructive criticism where it's warranted, but to share the successes too. So it's fun to be a part of these processes. And I think we really kind of all get to learn and grow together, learn from some of our forebears' mistakes, and then get to share some of our own. So it's a great spot to be, and happy to be here to share some stories today.
Yeah, Michael Fosteroff asked if it was a long form live streaming of a design construction project. And I think not necessarily. I have actually set up a few cameras like during the decom stage and then kind of the rebuilding stage, like time-lapse cameras to put on to architecture, like to put on my firm's website. But it's really like just understanding the nuances of like, oh, we came upon this site issue and this is how we're going to handle it. And rather than putting it in a very pretty package, even sometimes just like camera in hand saying like, we don't know where we're going to go with this. Like, let's work through it together. So thinking about what we are working through together, Adam, why don't you tell everyone as much as you're comfortable with about where Level is and how you're interested in building out a company that is really architecturally focused, but development minded, and looking to bridge more into the real estate and development areas of architecture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So our company was really born out of a development group, and they had a need to have an in-house architect produce a lot of their work as really a means of cost savings. And the model that they had set up, and this is concept companies, was to really be able to do everything in-house for a build to suit project. And so, we're talking everything from kind of original due diligence on property through the real estate transactions, all full legal team, site construction, architect, civil engineering, just kind of soup to nuts everything. So that's how we got our start as just the in-house architect for this development group. And we wanted more than that. And so we're very excited to be part of a development group, but we started to diversify and we got very involved in public work, which is the majority of my background. We started taking on other third-party clients, and really now we're kind of at an inflection point where we've outgrown our usefulness to concept, and we're actually kind of in the middle of figuring out how do we pull ourselves out and become a fully independent third-party architecture firm. So we've kind of had this really interesting growth arc that was fueled by the rocket boosters of a development company. And now we want to get into some of the development ourselves. And so as we are kind of looking ahead towards this next adventure, we're doing it with the lens of, yes, we still want to practice architecture. That's something we've cut our teeth on, that we've become, I think, moderately good at. But we do want to continue to do development as really a way of diversifying what we do, and hopefully to generate, some additional income streams as well. So that's kind of in a nutshell where we're at. And I'm happy to dissect any of that and go into further detail anywhere.
Well, maybe in order to figure out what detail or where we should jump down to, we're going to launch another poll question about various different aspects of practice and where you're thinking of heading, to help gauge our audience's interest in where we want to talk about. So Bo, do you want to? Perfect. So we can talk more about building in public. We can talk more about cultivating an entrepreneurial mindset as an architect, which I'm always really happy about. I'm imagining that a lot of people want to talk about architects as development or development partners. And you also have your real estate license, and I'd love to pick your brain a little bit more on why you went ahead and did that.
Sure.
And also talking about new technologies and practice and how to apply. So is there anything that you want to kind of talk about while we're waiting for answers to come in about where level is now? Michael says he votes all of the
all the
sorry,
above. Yeah,
it was a one choice single choice answer. But is there anything more that can help us set the stage about where you are with level and kind of regrowing, but also how you're thinking strategically about all of these other areas you want to go into?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that kind of came out of this split that I was talking about was really a need to define not only, we talk about like our business goals and our mission and our vision and our values as it terms to our business, but as we were going through this process, I got asked the question, well, what's your personal mission? What's your personal vision? And so I think when we're looking at this, particularly through the lens of building in public, a lot of it becomes a conversation about authenticity and what is it that, I am looking to do? What is it that collectively we are looking to do? And for us, it was, well, we want to give back to our community. We've done a lot of work with not just Concept, but other development groups too. And we've seen how projects can go from what was like a really great vision, and then you kind of put it through the ringer of budget and schedule and all these other constraints. And what comes out on the other end is a project, but it's not always contributing to kind of the community or the fabric of society. And so is really important for us when we're defining our own sort of mission and values to give back and to have these lessons that the next generation can learn from and build off of and to create something that's really meaningful. And so I think the next logical step was, well, we need to become our own clients if we want to do this, because then we have the final say. It's not just giving advice, it's us actually pushing it through. And so I think a lot of what we're going to get into and what we're going to talk about here really stemmed from this idea of defining what our personal missions are and then really leaning into them.
Bo, do you want to go ahead and launch the answers to that survey so we can see where response? I figured as much. Architects as development or development partners, and technology and practice. A little bit. So a lot of building in public. So I know we had some people join us a little late, and in the beginning we were kind of talking about what building in public was. I need you to take off your architect hat for just a moment when we talk about this. So building in public was actually a terminology, and I know this might be second time for a few of you, but it was actually a technology or a terminology born out of the tech center, where people were openly sharing essentially how they were building new products or new services or and developing new things. And they were sharing it with people because they were literally sharing it with the community that they were building it for, so they can get more active feedback, and it can come to, not only can they learn faster, so they can iterate to a product sooner, but at the same time, they're essentially growing a community who would buy the product that they are getting to. So the way we apply it in architecture, or the way that we can apply it, is this is kind of a live lesson. Another way we could look at it is like a hot seat. And Adam's in the hot seat talking to him about how he is building out level differently now that they are going to look to build beyond concept, and the strategies for essentially having an opportunity to almost start from scratch and kind of define what level wants to be in the future, as well as how they want to continue to work with concepts development partners, or even seek out more partnerships in the going forward. So hopefully, Tim, that helps you reframe. It's really just some people literally, when they build in public, they say like, here are my revenue streams. Here's where I'm getting different revenue streams. Here's what's most successful. Here's what's least successful. What do you guys find more important? And then people tell them, and then they actually switch and they fine tune their business as they're building, because they're getting instant feedback. So we're here to gather feedback from you, but we're also here just to kind of actively talk through with Adam his thought process on building level. So hopefully that's good. And it looks like we need to lean into a little bit more of the architect and development piece there. So you started talking about your value and vision. And if anyone else has any questions, raise your hand. We'll bring you to the stage. We can also feel free to ask questions in chat or in Q&A, and I'm trying to cover all of our bases today. So, values, I think the values that you're setting up and being more of a socially driven organization, I think runs counter to your typical developer stance, right? Developers are in it to make a revenue. So how does that work? And is there real opportunity for development partnership if you're looking for more of a social impact instead of, well, they're looking at the pro forma, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a really good question, and I certainly don't want to like stereotype all development groups. I think there are a lot that really do are trying to kind of improve the community that they're in, or who do want to take the risk and do something to improve social good. And honestly, I think even those who are really much more focused on just bottom line still would like to have that as part of the project. Sometimes it's one of the things that can be on the chopping block, and I think because we're coming from a different profession, because we are doing architecture in addition to this, I feel like that provides us a little bit of a safety net to where we don't have to necessarily look at squeezing every single penny out of this job in order to make it work, because we've got revenue coming in from something else. At the same time, I think there's very much a reality to, is this going to pencil? Are you going to be able to get a loan if you need to? Where is that revenue coming from? This can't purely be something that is give back, when you're not financing the entire thing yourself. So there is a little bit of a balance between that. And I think for us, the lens is, we don't have to make this absolutely the most profitable thing possible. It'd be great if, it's got to at least break even for it to be functional and feasible. But, if we can have a little bit of passive income coming off the side too, great. And if we do even better, that's kind of a cherry on the top. And so that's, at least right now, how we're trying to attack our game plans here.
So when you started the webinar, you noted that like concept was this kind of conglomeration all in one service. So what did you learn as an architect working on behalf of a developer in that way?
Yes, I mean, there's so many lessons learned, and I think a lot of it is about timing and like, when are you at the table? Because in a very traditional sort of development setting, the architect isn't brought into the project until they've usually already got a site, they've already got a tenant. Oftentimes there's a civil engineer that's already provided some sort of, the building has to go here kind of footprint. And a lot of the decisions that can be really damning to the project have already been made. Whereas had we been a part of the discussion while they were looking at the property, we're looking at municipal codes and things like that, there's a lot of input that somebody who typically has that sort of holistic project lens can really bring to the table. And so being a part of a development group, we were sometimes able to get to the table in advance, but certainly not always. And so I think the very first lesson learned is you really need to be involved kind of every part of this process, so that you can at least have some sense of input before something is just handed to you and now you have all these constraints already built in. I think another really, really important lesson is that you can overextend yourself really quickly. And, certainly from like a project complication standpoint, but even from a lending standpoint. And, when the economy is good, I think a lot of jobs can go really quickly and it's easy to push funding through and a lot can happen. But I think as we've all seen in the current fiscal and economic environment, that can dry up really quickly. And if you've gone out too far in front of your skis, that can start to produce a lot of trouble just in terms of, how are you funding various things, and it can shift your attention from working on the projects to working on tenants for spaces just so you can get funding and loans and things of that nature.
Yeah, so because you brought up funding, and now you're going off on your own, where are you looking to develop immediately? Are you like, where is that funding source coming from? And if it's, I'm horrible with two-part questions, but if you are looking to partner with developers, so like, let's start with like where that funding source is going to come from, and then and how you're going to get to that table sooner.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and there's kind of a lot of tangential answers, but I'll try to kind of address each one here. And the first one is, so part of it, we want to be able to to generate revenue through our architecture practice, and we want to set aside a portion of that says, okay, this is something that could go out as a bonus, but we want to set it aside and put that into the development fund, and hopefully that'll turn into a bigger bonus down the line, but we've got to set it aside for now. So that's one part, and that's the easiest one that we can control. There's definitely another piece where, because we've been in the industry and because we've been in our area for so long, we've got a pretty big network, and that extends from city commissioners and people kind of on local government boards to realtors in the area to other developers and architects and contractors in the area. And so there's definitely an avenue we want to look at with partnering, where we don't have to do the whole lift ourselves, but where multiple people can benefit at once. And then I think there is sort of the other avenue of, okay, is there something where maybe we can do another office for ourselves or for somebody who's a friend who we know needs one, and it's something where we've already got the contact, we've already got the want, and now we can just kind of essentially broker that relationship and make it happen. And so there's a couple different avenues that we want to go down, but I think kind of the unifying thing is that it all comes through that network and who you're talking to and what what's available out there. Timing's very important, but that's why it was really important for me to dip into the real estate side and to really start to get to know, commercial real estate agents and even residential real estate agents, but start to learn that side of the practice at something more than just kind of a cursory level of being tangential to it as an architect.
Yeah, I think I want to come back to the network piece, and I wanted to come back to the real estate piece, but you mentioned something at the very beginning, and it was that you can just set, like, I think every architect wishes they make enough to set aside a piece, not only for a rainy day, but for development. So is there anything that you're looking at doing, because architecture practices are known to run on pretty slim margins, that will kind of place you in a position you to do better as an architect when it comes to setting aside those reserves?
Yeah, well, I mean, our strategies have been a couple things, and one was to really, figure out a process that works for us. And of course, every project is different, but there's usually kind of a common thread that if we do, X, Y, and Z, the project, unless something goes really off the rails, will go, reasonably well for us. And so we took a really long time to sort of develop our internal processes and make sure everyone within the office was trained up on them and that everybody shared the same sort of vision. And that in itself was a process. And, we're far from perfect at it, but there's results. And how do we know there are results? Well, we've been tracking it. We've been tracking metrics. I know we've got kind of the software piece, but we adopted Monograph. And so we were able to see kind of the performance of our projects and understand which projects we were doing well on, what phases of projects we were doing well on, and some that we were not doing well on at all. And so it's helped us to inform the types of projects that we say yes to, and it's also helped us streamline our process. I think the other thing that we've done, and again, with sort of mixed success, is go to having a lot of contract workers, and where we've had a lot of success, it's been with either people who we have worked with and who either wanted to move or wanted, not to have a full-time workload, but kind of do some work here and there. or even people who were interested in contract work who we kind of brought in and trained up and then, really set free. And not having the additional overhead, but also, giving those contract workers sort of the freedom and an expectation of how much work, we're going to have for them. That's been a recipe for success, where we've been able to save on some of that overhead and again kind of funnel that away to different channels.
I don't ever think we've talked about how big development or how big level is. So, I mean, you mentioned several things when it comes to resources and setting up processes and documentation, that I feel like a lot of small and even medium-sized firm owners here, and they're like, that is something that we don't have the bandwidth to do. So how big is level?
Yeah, well, I mean, so it's at the moment, honestly, we're 4 with a handful of contract workers, and we've been as big as I think 14, and 14 even plus a couple contract workers. And so it's scaled up and scaled down. And I think we've really found that sweet spot kind of in that 4 to 6 sort of full-time range, but then having the release valve for, oh man, we have a couple major deadlines, let's ramp up. And now all of a sudden we're 10, So that's where we're at. And you mentioned, like that's a lot of extra bandwidth to produce these processes. And it is, I mean, it was definitely a lift that we had to be really conscious about and make a concerted effort of saying, okay, everyone needs to dedicate a minimum of X amount of hours this week to, this process. And then we want to spend a little bit of time reviewing it with everyone next week. And, let's move on to the next. And so it seemed daunting at first, but I think once we spelled out a plan for, okay, if everyone puts, 4 hours a week towards it, and we know that's 4 hours a week of production that we're not going to get, we're banking on ourselves to make that up on the back end. And that's exactly what happened. So it is definitely an investment that we had to get ourselves to believe in would pay off, and it did.
So talk about that. So I imagine, for instance, since you do have so many contract workers, that it's easier to onboard them into your processes because you actually have processes in place, for one, that go beyond, I'm sure, a file, like a project file structure, which is where I feel like a lot of architects' processes tend to stop, especially if you're a firm of 5 or less people. Where else have you, when you talk about it paying off, have you seen it pay off for you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think in our customer service is probably where it's paid off the most, because even if somebody doesn't know the answer, they know where to look for it or the question to ask. And, obviously, if you're talking with a client and they ask a question, in a perfect world, you've got the perfect answer to that question. But we always tell everyone, the next best thing is like, I don't know the answer to that question, but I know where to look for it. And so, give me an hour or two and let me get back to you. And then actually following up and getting back to that person. So, it has definitely helped having processes. I think we've also found that initially we went too far and everything was so process oriented that, people just got into this mindset of checking boxes, and we really lost that sort of critical thinking element of what makes us special as design thinkers and as architects. And so we kind of had to learn all these rules to realize which ones were important, which ones we could bend from time to time, and which ones that we just absolutely had to do every time, no matter what. And so it really was a process. And I think you kind of start by compiling all this information, and then it becomes an exercise in editing. And again, in building in public, talking to our clients about, hey, we tried something new on this project, or we're going to try something new, can you be patient with us and give us your feedback? And the handful of times we did that, even when things didn't go perfectly smoothly, our clients were really understanding. And they're like, yeah, just next time we know what we're going to do. And, but thankfully they're talking about it next time. So I think just having something to go back to and kind of knowing where to look for answers, even if you don't have them, has been something that's been really important that's come out of this for us.
Yeah, so we have a question in from the audience. They're asking, what's your day to day like as a developer versus an architect? So what are the different type of hats you wear depending on what you're doing?
It is everything. I mean, I wear every hat. We talk about marketing to drawing on projects to project management, on the architecture side, and then on the real estate side, it's just a little bit of everything. And so, what does a different day look like? honestly, a lot of it on the development side is searching for funding, searching for people who are, looking to build something that you can help them with, or to purchase something that you can help them with. But so much of it is about, again, building your network and, staying in contact with people. And so a lot of times on the real estate and development side, a typical day could be cold calling, or it could be driving around looking for sites that are on the market or that are in areas that have a certain type of zoning but are not on the market, and then calling up the owners of those parcels and asking if they're interested in selling, or if they'd consider selling, or, hey, I've got a buyer who's looking for a warehouse and you've got a warehouse, would you ever consider selling? And so a lot of it is just kind of cold calling, prospecting, doing research, doing due diligence on property, seeing what highest and best use can be. So, it could be that, or it could be actually talking with people, and talking to a bank and trying to secure funding and putting contracts together, and lawyers and everything else that comes along with it. So it's very different, just on a day-to-day level, but certainly very different from a typical day in an architecture office. Not that there is a typical day in an architecture office.
Yeah, let's dig deeper into the network and the type of people that you need to network out to, and the type of people that you need to find, or the type of events, or where you need to show up on, how you need to show up on LinkedIn, whatever it is you're using to attract and talk to people that have money or have ideas and are willing to take a chance and partnership with you. Like, where are you finding those people?
Yeah, so I would say that's in its infancy. So, take all this with I'm just kind of starting out, sort of a grain of salt, but a lot of it has stemmed from the architecture side. And so it's either people who, I've already worked with before, and now I can call them up and say, hey, we worked together last year, just wanted to see if you had any other projects on your radar. And oh, by the way, now I'm a real estate agent, and so we offer this other type of service if you're interested. And a lot of the time it's just, thanks for checking in. We'll call you when that happens. But every now and then, you get somebody who says, oh, that's really interesting. We are thinking about this project. Or, well, I don't have any projects, but my brother-in-law saw what we did over here and is very interested. And so a lot of it is just that client relationship management for clients that you already have, because we're already tangential to this industry. We're already talking to the civil engineers who are working on these projects with these developers. So I feel like we've got a little bit of a leg up already just with the network that we probably already have. The other side to that story is I have been trying to really just, pick the brain of a whole bunch of real estate agents who they've been doing this for a while. This is where I'm still very green. And, when you talk about funding sources and, all the different types of loans out there and all the different types of way you can be an owner of a parcel and how to set those things up, that's something that on the architecture side, I had very little exposure to, even being part of the development group. And so that's where I'm really trying to build my skill set right now, so that when somebody does come to me with one of the jobs from either to the development or real estate side, I can speak in an educated fashion about it, and I can actually know what I'm talking about, as opposed to just saying, well, I know that happens, and I can go figure out how to do it. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But I think the other piece of it is, at the end of the day, you're going to have your government officials who are making a lot of decisions on, well, you're asking for a zoning exception, or you're looking at this sort of thing here. And so making sure that you're maintaining good relationships with all of those people as well, I think is a really big part of it. And I've really observed that from afar, but it's something that I've seen consistently throughout practice.
Thankfully, getting your real estate license isn't nearly as daunting as going through the AREs. But I hear of architects all the time, and the real estate agent that sold me my house, that helped me buy the house, was he was a friend of mine. He was a colleague that I went to school with. He was an architect turned real estate agent that then left architecture to focus on real estate full time. You've done something very different with your license, I think, in a very tactful way when it comes to building out level. So what was your thinking behind getting the real estate license?
Yeah.
If you're not just going to leave and do like the what is it, the Selling the OC version in Gainesville, Florida.
Yeah, right. It's probably not as glamorous down here, but no, I mean, you mentioned it. There's a much lower barrier to entry on the real estate side. You know, there's a decent amount of required studying and coursework that you have to take, and even once you're licensed, you know, there's cost to it. I think a lot of people just see, oh, you know, I can take 40 some odd hours of continuing education, take the exam, and I've got the license. But you do have to attach yourself to a brokerage, which usually has fees, and you have to join, you know, an MLS or some way to see the properties, and there's cost to that and to maintain your license. And so it is something that you need to be somewhat committed to. It's not something that if you're just kind of going out on a limb to go do it, you know, there's going to be costs and continuing education that goes along with it. So you know, that's one thing to keep in mind. But the reason for me is that development in itself is a fairly risky proposition, just because usually it takes a lot of capital. And, you know, I think if you're good at it, there's potential for big returns, but there's definitely potential for it to go sideways as well. And so as someone who typically tends to be a little bit risk adverse, which is kind of in antithesis to the development world, right? You know, this was a way to softly enter that world and not have to just kind of pull the rug out of something where I have had success, but to really lean into this idea of like architecture and, you know, what can we do to create something where we're not necessarily just doing the drawings and then, you know, we hand those over and now it's someone else's, and you know, someone's getting a real estate commission off of it. They're selling that hopefully beautiful project and making a huge return on it. How can we be a part of that? And how can we contribute to that? And how can we share in hopefully some of the returns in that process? And so this was really just kind of a soft way to get my foot in the door and start to build up some skills to then lean into it a little bit more.
Are there any specific services then that you've been able to add? You talked about going out to clients and saying, hey, I have these additional services now that I'm a real estate agent. So what do those look like? And what is the revenue to those services against kind of your time spent versus the revenue to a typical architecture project and the time you spend there?
Yeah, so that's a really fascinating question too. And I think so far, there hasn't been a whole lot that has come out of that. I think what it has surprisingly led to is more architecture jobs. And, you know, you'd think it would kind of swing the other way and start to open a whole bunch of doors. But what we've seen instead is, you know, instead of that, well, my brother-in-law is looking to do this, you know, it's been, well, we've already got the property, but we are looking for an architect. And, you know, and so it's actually opened a lot of doors on the architecture side. But I do feel like what it's done is that now we have that contact and we've kind of proven ourselves on the architecture side, so that now not only do we have the contact, but we've got their trust. And so, you know, there's a handful of people that when it comes time to do the next project, we are expecting, you know, we're hopeful, we're optimistic that we'll get the phone call. So I think right now it's just sort of building out that Rolodex, building out that contact list. But I think there's also something to it, you know, just like when you get your license in architecture, you don't know any more than the day before you took that last ARE and you passed. But now that you can say you're that registered architect or you have that AIA after your name, it carries a little bit of weight. And so, you know, now when we enter a room and we say, well, we do this and we're licensed in this, people really raise an eyebrow. And I think it builds a lot of credibility right off the bat that, okay, you know, clearly these guys know what they're doing if they're kind of capable of doing all of these things.
Yeah. So we have another question from Manny, who's asking, what do you consider the most important lesson learned? Manny, if you want to expand upon any specifics you want us to cover in there, let us know. But through this process, I guess, you know, I would say, what is the most important lesson you learned having been a part of the concept that has informed how Level is going to look going forward?
Yeah. So honestly, I think a couple of the biggest lessons learned are, you know, how you use your capital. I think, you know, as architects, we know the triangle of budget, schedule, and quality, and that's something that we're always thinking about for our clients. You have to go through that yourself and, you know, really feel what it's like to make that decision when it's coming out of your pocket. And I've been fortunate enough to, be able to do a home renovation and to build our own office. And this Zoom background you're seeing behind us is our office that we built from the ground up. And when you've got a fixed budget and that's coming out of your bottom line or your pocket, those decisions are a lot more difficult to make than when you're just offering your client advice. And so I feel like if there's any opportunity, even on a small scale, just to experience some of that, and really, really, really understand the importance of a budget and financing and what it means if you're saving money or if you have to go over that and what goes into those decisions, that has given me a whole lot of empathy for not only our architecture clients, but even the developers who, again, are oftentimes starting out with that sort of best intent in mind, but an understanding for how that thread may get lost along the way. So any opportunity you have to kind of get in and do something for yourself, I think is just absolutely invaluable experience, especially from an empathy standpoint.
Yeah. So tell us where you are kind of in the arc of where level is. We jokingly said that you've been jumping from office to office this morning. But I don't think people realize kind of how new level is right now.
Yeah. I mean, we're like a 7-year-old company. And again, I think I mentioned it at the top of the call, but it felt like we just had a rocket booster attached to our back, being attached to a development group. And we had work that was being, spoon fed to us, and it was like drinking out of a fire hose, just trying to keep up. And, before we made the effort to put some processes in place, it was like the Wild West. And, people were just kind of doing what they knew from previous firms or previous jobs. And it wasn't always pretty, and so it took that effort to kind of to say, okay, we need to do something in a unified fashion, and we need to be strategic about the jobs that we're taking on and how we're going to grow. And so it did morph into something where our work was 100% fueled by our developer group to 75% to 50-50 split. And, now as we're looking to separate, it's probably less than 20% of the work that we're doing, and hopefully we'll get to continue to do it. But, we've been able to build up a portfolio outside of that group to where really, when we set our flag as a standalone architecture firm, we've already been doing that for the last handful of years. And so I think some of the projects that we've worked on, just in the scale of the projects that we've gotten, are kind of a testament to that. As graduates from the University of Florida, UF does a Gator 100 of the fastest 100 growing Gator graduate led firms. And this year was the first year that we were eligible and qualified. And so we're kind of hitting all of these benchmarks of a firm, that really probably most firms don't get to experience until later down the road, because we had this opportunity to grow so quickly. And, it wasn't without heartache and without its own challenges, but I think the opportunity to get so many reps in a condensed schedule really helped us grow. And, as we talk about this sort of idea of building in public, it really was a lot of trial by fire and a lot of, all right, we just had to go at that. It wasn't so great, but, the next one's already here. So let's learn our lessons and let's move on. So I think that answered your question. If not,
I think a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
That's fine. We do have 2 other questions coming in. So Kurt, I see your hand up. I'm going to go with Helen first, though, because her question popped up first. And then Nima just dropped another one. So how do you see interest rates affecting developers, or what are you hearing? And then how specifically is it going to affect your relationship with them?
Yes, so that is a really important question, and it's not a particularly great economic landscape out there right now. I mean, I think everyone can think back to really as recently as 2021, and commercial real estate was at an all-time high for lending in 2021. And so, the Fed hiked interest rates in 2022, and now the loan to value rate of properties has gone way down. And so the lending landscape has, I don't want to say it's dried up, but it is much harder to come by a commercial loan these days. And I know, last year it was very, very difficult, even for our experienced developer partners with huge portfolios. And it was just difficult to get a commercial loan. And so I think, part of it is that now we have more people working from home. And so the value of, not just Class C, Class B office space, but even Class A office space has dropped. And, you're seeing interest rates spike, value going down. And so it's really difficult to make a cap rate that pencils that someone's comfortable getting a loan for. And so there is a major effect on commercial real estate and commercial lending right now. And I think it's a little bit of, we just need to weather the storm. I think there's always going to be some need for building. And so I think you're seeing projects loosen up a little bit just due to the nature of people need something, and even the banks, they need to make some sort of loans. So it's starting to loosen up a little bit. I know, on the residential side, certainly sales have slowed down and inventory is still low, but there's a rate of return that's still anticipated to be 5% on residential next year. And so even though rates are high, it still makes sense to buy because it's going to be more valuable in the future. So I think people are being a little bit more cautious about the projects that they're going after, and banks are certainly being more cautious about how they're lending right now. So that's absolutely a major factor into having any of these projects go. And that's why, hopefully attacking it from a little bit of a different lens where we can contribute in some other sort of fashion might be something that helps us, personally unlock some of that. You might be muted there, Evelyn.
Sorry, I did. Kurt, you have your hand up. Do you want to come off on, or do you want to say your question out loud? You should be able to turn your mic on, I believe. Hi, Kurt. You have your mic is muted at the moment.
Might be an accidental hand raise.
It might be an accidental hand raise.
Kurt, I'm going to disable your talking again, but feel free to chat us if you did want to ask.
No, that's fine. So Nima, did you want to, so Nima asks, I want to know how much you care about design when you're designing a building that you own rather than a building for a client. I think there is a little bit of a difference there, because also I think there's a difference between designing a building that you own but also work in versus a building that you would own and then lease out too. So I guess, does how you design change depending on the outcome of that building? Sorry, Nima, I took some liberty there with your question.
Yeah, and feel free to clarify what we're going here too, Nima. But I would say hopefully there's not too much of a difference. I mean, I genuinely feel when we take on a project for a client that we become their agent, much like a real estate agent is the agent for whoever they're representing, buying a piece of real estate. We as architects, legally are supposed to have the best interest of the owner in mind. And so from a design standpoint, I always try to present a design that's, exciting, but also pragmatic, and where I'm being a good steward of the client's budget. And I think, outwardly, that's the answer I would give you. To give you a little bit more of a nuanced answer, there definitely is a difference. And, even if it's something as small as, we'll say $5,000, if I'm working with a client and we come to something on the job site where something's going to cost $5,000, and the option is either live with it for nothing or pay the $5,000 to get exactly what you want. I can only give them my opinion of that, and I can say, well, if it were me, I would probably just live with it, because $5,000 to me in this instance would be a lot of money, and that's something that I'm not going to think about it on the day-to-day, and I'd be fine with it. But it may be something that is really important to them, and so that conversation flips when you're the owner. And when it's literally your money, that decision becomes even harder, because you're not just offering the advice, you are having to live with it. It is something that you are going to have to look at or know. And so I think from a big picture standpoint, my process doesn't change, but the amount of time I spend making that decision and kind of agonizing over it versus just presenting maybe some pros and some cons and a little bit of a personal opinion. I think that's where the difference really is.
Great. So hopefully we covered Nima's question. It looks like Kurt was an accidental hand raise. I just wanted to throw in some of my own little dialogue there, that I've been telling architects more actually to follow fintech or finance tech. Nima says that's exactly what she's looking for, because there are always new ways that people are looking to put together packages and get access to different types of capital. One, there's this new renovation or RenoFi loans. Have you heard of these, Adam?
I
Where you
have
can get
very.
lower rates on the potential future value of your home after the renovation. Do you have any thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I'm fascinated in, financial tech, just kind of all of these new companies in general. And so I think part of the fascination is the same reason why we want to be this sort of architecture plus model, because I do think there are better ways to do things out there, and that people should have greater access to equity, without really having to leverage everything that they own. And so I think a lot of these companies, there really is some interesting potential. But you really do have to do your research and your homework and read the fine print and consult with legal teams, because there are some out there too where, and again, I'm not pointing the finger to kind of any one company, but I've heard the horror stories of, oh, it's this subscription-based model, and they guarantee approval, but then you get down to it and it's like, well, they only guarantee approval on projects that they approve, and so they don't actually guarantee approval, but now you've already paid the subscription fee to kind of figure that out the hard way. And so I think there are alternate models out there about how you can raise capital, either kind of jointly or, again, like you said, based on what the improved sort of value of your property is going to be. There are also, some loans out there that are very conventional loans that kind of do that as well. And so knowing how to leverage those, again, knowing how to structure kind of the ownership of your properties and how you might be able to sell something and then have that roll into like a tax deferred next investment. I think, really playing the game with a lot of the rules that are already in existence is a good strategy. And then doing your homework on some of the newer methods of finding financing out there as well is probably a recipe for success.
Yeah, one of, I've been looking at, we've always been interested in getting a second home. And I specifically have been looking at real estate in Santa Fe. And because it's a tourist area, there's actually a lot of ability for fractional ownership, which is like, I think which is definitely a level up from timeshares. But I do see fractional ownership becoming more of an interesting model on the residential side. Do you have any thoughts on that? And what about even fractional ownership from like a corporation type of model as well?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think right now people are seeing a lot of success in that model. I don't have a whole lot of personal experience there, but from what I've heard is it's kind of like now is the time, because I think a lot of the real estate laws, and it's probably more honestly the municipal laws, are kind of catching up to that. Like we had the B&B movement where everyone was doing these B&Bs, and then all of a sudden, all your local governments were saying either you can't do that there, or it has to be taxed a certain way, or it has to be set up in this very specific way that's now impossible to B&B any apartment in New York. Or so I think we're kind of in that sweet spot before a lot of the legislation catches up to it. So it's one of those things that if you're interested, get on it right now, because you might be a little bit late to the game if you wait too long. But I do think, particularly like you said, in some of these more tourist markets, that there will continue to be a value and really a need for that, especially with how accessible or inaccessible the housing market currently is.
Yeah, and Picasso, Helen dropped it in. Picasso is one of them. I do see actually a lot of other, the ones that I was looking at Santa Fe was actually Sotheby's was the realtor agent on it. I don't know who the developer was, but Picasso tends to go in and buy like they buy really nice homes in areas, and then people don't like it because they're in very residential areas. In fact, they've gotten into trouble now having these somewhat rental homes in those areas. I do see fractional home ownerships, like people building like larger complexes around fractional ownership, so they get less in trouble with the local residential neighborhood. But I'm interested, even if you're looking at developing a strip mall, like if you were to go in and talk to every single current leaser of the strip mall and see if you could put together a model where you buy out the existing owner, and then all of those renters then transition to ownership. I see interesting possibilities there if you can find the right kind of community to package together.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an interesting thought. I think that's probably far more capital than I've wrapped my head around at this point in time. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to kind of own the space that you work in. And when you're paying rent, like it'd be nice to pay rent to yourself and have that go to something that's becoming an asset as opposed to something that's just kind of walking out the door every month. So there's definitely, a huge value to that, especially for small business owners. And that's something I'd certainly love to see just for communities in general.
Yeah. So Tim, I would say Tim is asking, isn't fractional the same as timeshare? I joked that it's like a higher level of timeshare, but it is I know timeshare says that you have like an equity stake in a resort, but you don't actually have a lot of empowerment to say like what happens with that property if you buy into timeshare. Fractional ownership, you tend to be, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but it tends to be like up to 12 families owning one home, and you actually have to set up. You have to set up a corporation that the house ownership falls under, and you can then more easily sell your portion of that corporation should you ever want to buy out of the fractional ownership, versus it's very hard to get rid of timeshare. So please tell my parents to stop buying timeshare because I'm going to inherit all of that. But I think they own like 6 weeks. I'm not kidding. But anyways, there's some benefits to fractional ownership over timeshare, but you are paying the equivalent of an HOA for maintenance, for somebody to cover maintenance on that, and you have to set up like a sharing mechanism for who gets what weeks out of the year, but you do have a little bit more say and the ability to do more with your equity in the property than you do a timeshare. Is that, I don't know, Adam, do you have any more to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm far from an expert on this subject as well, so I don't want to get too out in front of myself. But I do think it is, they're pieces of almost like a co-op, like you said, where it's a corporation that owns it, and the splitting the time portion is like a timeshare. But I think, like you said, it's kind of different otherwise.
Yeah. So we are 2 minutes from the top of the hour. I don't know if there's any last questions, but Bo, if you want to put up kind of like the how helpful question this was to everyone. I hope everyone found this to be helpful. But we have 2 more poll questions if you can stay put. Otherwise, thank you, Adam, so much for building in public and with us. And this is something that we try to do at the Practice Community and Lab. So if you want to join us in the Practice Community Lab, Bo will put up one more question after this, and we will put you in touch with how you can join us in the PC+L. Otherwise, stay tuned for the next Designing for Success series. We're going to bring on Tyler Sulamala, and we're going to talk about how architects can become better salesperson people and the differentiation between sales and business development. And then Bo, I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to say about Acelab before we close.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll go ahead and end this poll and launch our last one. And yeah, in terms of Acelab, there's going to be a quick survey after today's webinar. You're going to have the option to sign up for a demo with Acelab's team. So if you're interested in learning more about what we do over at Acelab, feel free to say yes to that on the survey, and Helen will probably reach out to you to schedule something.
Okay. Thanks all for joining us.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And
you.
if anyone has a moment, there's our last poll question. So if we can get a few responses to that, that would be great. That'll allow you to express interest in a bunch of great content from the practice of architecture.
Thanks all. I think, Adam, unless you have, I don't see any more questions, so.
Okay, well, thank you. It was a real pleasure to be here today and just kind of talk about what we're diving into. And, you know, for anyone who's still on listening, I just encourage them to follow their dreams and, you know, have a vision and really lean into it. You know, it can be messy at times, but I think we're all here to support each other. And so, you know, being a part of these collective communities, sharing our successes and our failures together is part of us growing together. And I'm all for that. So thank you.
Definitely.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I hope everybody has a great rest of their week.
Thanks. Thanks, Bo. Bye.
Bye.